morning, America. My name is Presley Cook.
And I'm Shaylee Long, MDA.
And we are coming to you live from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Today is April 10th, and we have breaking news for you all. Yesterday, General Lee of the Confederate Army has finally surrendered to the Union forces at the Battle of Appomattox.
Indeed, he has. And our men have not died or fought in vain.
Truly, truly. It is a wonderful day. Celebrations happening all over the states. Now, Shaylee, would you please give us some background leading up to this event? What happened? How did we get here?
Yes, thank you for asking. So, about 10 months prior to this battle, Lee and his army were engaged in a siege of Richmond, Virginia. And his men were starving. They were severely injured and dying. So, Lee decided to retreat to North Carolina to meet up with another general by the name of Joseph E. Johnston. And in order to do that, he needed to gain supplies. So what did he do? He attacked the Union at Fort Stedman to try to gain supplies. But they lost, which means they lost supplies and they lost more men. So Lee flees again, and then the Union met up with them and fought at the Five Forks Battle, which caused another loss for Lee and the Confederacy. With that being said, they lost more men and more supplies. So Lee decided to flee again. As he flees, he realizes the Union is on the other side of the Appomattox River, so therefore he can't get to North Carolina, so his plan does not work. What does he do? He thinks fast. He's like, what is the next thing I can do to help my army? I need supplies. So he decides to go to the next railroad to gain supplies. It was a bargain because he didn't know if a train was actually going to be there. And he didn't know if the Union was going to be surrounding him. So they go, and unfortunately, the Union was there, the train was not. So the Union attacked, Lee was forced to surrender, and the Union won.
As sorrowful as that must be for the South, it's very celebratory here in the North. Thank you so much for that, Shaylee. We are going to now head over to Alexis Walters, who is going to be breaking down the battle sequences. Over to you, Alexis.
The Battle of Appomattox Courthouse started on April 9th, 1865. This was the final battle that led to Lee's surrender. In the days prior, Lee had abandoned the Confederate capital located in the city of Petersburg. Lee was soft-spoken and cared about his men, believing they could do anything. He was known as a man of honor and as a gentleman. He seemed like a prince the way he dressed and the way he directed his army. However, Lee's opponent Ulysses S. Grant had humility and integrity. He came with mud splatter on his boots and led his army with a very capable staff. He came from a poor, humble background whose father was a tanner. Early in the morning on April 9th, the Confederates launched an attack on the Union cavalry. They fell back, opening a door for the Confederates until more Union cavalry arrived from the west and south, circling Lee's forces. Although it seemed like he needed them, Lee asked for no more support or provisions. Soon after, he famously said, "There is nothing left me to do but to go and see General Grant. I would rather die 1,000 deaths." Lee felt hopeless and decided to make the hard decision to surrender. So General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army of Northern Virginia to Union Army General Ulysses S. Grant in Appomattox, 1865.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. Now, I think that this battle has definitely been one of the most important battles of the Civil War so far. When you really think about it, yes, it may not have been the bloodiest of battles. It may not have been the battle where it was the greatest, most astounding victory. Truly, it wasn't. But I think what makes it so important is that this is the battle that Lee finally surrendered. This was when really, I think this is when the pivotal turning point of the war is going to start. This is when we're going to start closing.
It's the celebratory of Union victory,
yes.
too.
Truly, yes.
Yeah.
It's extremely important, and I think that it's going to affect the war so much now. I think very soon we're going to start seeing the end of the war. The battles are going to stop because their most vital, important, influential, powerful general has surrendered. He's given up to us, really, and we are so excited here today. Now we are going to transfer over to another one of our reporters, Adelaide Newton, who is going to be interviewing President Abraham Lincoln and historian Mr. Edling. Over to you.
Thank you so much for being here today, President Lincoln.
My pleasure.
So, my first question is, were you expecting General Lee to surrender at the Battle of the Appomattox Courthouse? Or did you think that he would fight to the end?
You know, this war has been full of trials, difficulty, and stress. The South was very unrelenting, but I knew our Anaconda plan was going to win the war for us eventually. General Lee made a very great military leader, but he is also a gentleman who cares about his men. I knew when he was put in a dire spot, he would raise the white flag on the opponent on the account of his soldiers.
Very interesting. So, knowing that the South has surrendered, do you plan on punishment to let them know that seceding from the Union was not okay?
In the end, I think the nation just needs to be reunited. The South's economy is already extremely beaten up, and people are suffering. There will be lots of resentment and unresolved issues if I wait too long to allow the South to rejoin the Union and make the requirements too high. The main goal is peace.
That makes sense. So, what are your plans of reconstruction after all this damage that has been done?
Well, I'm continuing with my 10% plan, where 10% of the South voters need to swear loyalty to the Union. The South also needs to free its slaves. I want all freed men to have voting rights.
All right. And lastly, do you think another war like this will ever be likely to take place?
Well, I believe in this nation and know that we can move forward as one. This war has really made the country this war has really made the country sift through massive issues. In the future, we can talk through large disputes in politics and navigate solutions. I believe there can be peace. The key is learning from this war how to prevent another like it.
Well said. Thank you for your time. Mr. Edling, thank you so much for being here today at this interview.
Happy to be here.
So, as a historian, were you expecting the Civil War, which lasted 4 long years, to end so abruptly in the Battle of the Appomattox Courthouse?
Yes, the year 1864 was the year of decision of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. He was pressuring Grant to find a victory on the Western Front. But after Grant had found success in capturing Vicksburg and securing the Mississippi River for the Union, by that point the Anaconda Plan was in full effect. The South was running out of resources, and when Grant was transferred to confront Lee at Appomattox in 1865, after Lincoln had been elected for a full second term, the defeat of the Confederacy was inevitable.
Thank you for that thoughtful response. At the end of the Battle of the Appomattox Courthouse, the Confederate soldiers were pardoned and able to go home with property, their horses, and even Union rations. Do you think the Confederates should have been treated so generously?
I think this was a wise move on the part of Grant, but the success of this decision was thwarted by Andrew Johnson's presidency. Had Grant been able to follow up Lincoln's leadership, there might have been a more cohesive radical Republican plan for Reconstruction, but because Johnson favored the South and letting the South off a lot of things, that kind of caused Grant's plan to backfire a little bit.
Interesting. Finally, because General Lee surrendered to General Grant at the Battle of the Appomattox Courthouse, do you think this means that Grant was a better general than Lee?
History has a way of portraying Lee as the superior general because he lost fewer soldiers at each battle. But in my mind, Grant is really the superior tactician because it was Grant who had to go on the offensive to really take these defensive positions that the Confederacy had entrenched themselves in. Because of this, he was the one who was really outmaneuvering Lee and putting himself in the position to bring a conclusion to the war.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for this interview.
You're welcome.
Thus always to tyrants.